I'm very pleased to welcome you all here this afternoon to the Crown Lecture in Ethics, sponsored by the Lesser Crown Endowment and co-sponsored by the Sulzberger Family Fund. The Crown Lecture was endowed by the Crown family with particular help from Paula Crown, whose husband and family are here tonight. The Crown Lecture in Ethics was designed to address the ethical implications of issues across a number of fields, including the arts, sciences, medicine, business, and politics. It was conceived of as a centerpiece in Duke's and the Sanford School's continually expanding efforts to focus student, faculty, and public opinion and attention on the critical importance of ethical decision-making in the professions and public life. Previous Crown lecturers include scientist and author Jared Diamond, New York Times columnist Tom Friedman, science writer Rebecca Skloot, U.S. Senator Bill Bradley, Rwandan Paul Rusesabagina, whose heroics saved many lives, and Jody Williams, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in banning landmines. This particular lecture is also made possible by a gift to our co-sponsor, the Center for Child and Family Policy, from the Sulzberger Family Fund. Arthur Sulzberger, publisher of the New York Times, champion of free speech, and friend of the center, passed away recently. We also honor his legacy with this lecture. His daughter, Cynthia Fox Sulzberger, graduated from Duke and has drawn on her experience as a special education teacher to advise the center. This year's Crown lecturer, Marian Wright Edelman, founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund, will be introduced by Ken Dodge, the William McDougall Professor of Public Policy, Psychology, and Neuroscience, Director of the Center for Child and Family Policy, and co-director of the Duke Initiative in Education and Human Development. Ken?
Thank you, Bruce. It is a daunting task to introduce one's hero or heroine. After reading her books and hearing about her good works, I first witnessed a Marian Wright Edelman event 20 years ago and left inspired, uplifted, challenged, humbled, and energized. I'm confident we will all have that experience again today. Ms. Edelman is the leading voice for children in America. As founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund, she coined the phrase, "leave no child behind," well before it was usurped and twisted for political gain. Her accomplishments are so astounding that no one could make up this stuff. She was the first black woman admitted to the Mississippi Bar, the first alumni elected woman to the Yale Corporation, counsel to the Reverend Martin Luther King. She's received over 100 honorary degrees, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the MacArthur Foundation Prize, the Heinz Award, and the Albert Schweitzer Humanitarian Prize, and I could go on. The ears of academics in this audience will perk up to hear that she has been elected not only to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, but also the Institute of Medicine of the National Academy of Sciences. She has inspired us here at Duke to aspire to make a difference. As we are moving forward, I would like to echo Bruce's gratitude to the Crown family for supporting this lecture and pushing us at Sanford to keep ethics front and center. Likewise, we at the Center for Child and Family Policy thank the Sulzberger family for its generosity and support for focusing the spotlight on children living in poverty. I'm thrilled to have with us today Ms. Claire Forster, Duke class of 1987, who with her husband Dan Bernstein has provided the first gift that launches Duke's newest priority, the Initiative on Education and Human Development. We're most grateful for your faith and investment. With these gifts, we are able to engage the world about children, poverty, and hope. We're able to initiate scholarship that informs policy, and we're able to teach the coming generation of leaders. Ms. Edelman, we are humbled to be here today. We march alongside you in defense of children, But sometimes we naively bumble along in trying to figure out how we as a university and each of us as an individual can make a difference. And so we look forward to hearing you to be inspired all over again. It is my honor to introduce Marian Wright Edelman.
Thank you. I am very honored to be here with you, and I thank your dean and this wonderful head of this wonderful child advocate in your midst for that generous introduction, the Crown family, and all who made this evening possible. I appreciate the focus that Duke is putting on ethics and on human development, and look forward to working with you even more closely. And I'm very pleased that Duke, for the second year, has run a Children's Defense Fund Freedom School, and that your president has been a reader in my little rural hometown and thrilled everybody, and even learned how to do the Freedom School strut. So I'm really, we're going to be 40 years old next year, and I thought we would be out of business by now. I thought if we told people what children needed, and that it was, we could do the right thing by children and do the cost-effective by children, and for all of us, that we would do the right thing. But it's been the hardest work in the world. And the ultimate test of this democracy is whether a voteless, voiceless constituency can enjoy a level playing field. I think that the main national security problem we face does not come from any enemy without. It comes from our failure to invest in and protect our children. And it's going to be our undoing. And I think we have some very fundamental questions to ask. What kind of people do we Americans seek to be in the 21st century and third millennium? What kind of people do we want our children to be? Because our children will be what we are. We don't have a child problem, we have an adult problem, and we adults need to get it together. What kind of choices and sacrifices are we prepared to make to realize a more just, compassionate, and less violent society and world, one safe and fit for every child? And if the child is safe, all of us are safe. 1,000 years ago, the United States was not even a dream. Copernicus and Galileo had not told us the earth was round or that it revolved around the sun. Gutenberg's Bible had not been printed. Wycliffe had not translated it into English. And Martin Luther had not tacked his 95 Theses on the church door. Carter did not exist. Chaucer's and Shakespeare's tales had not been spun. And the miraculous music of Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and the Negro slaves in America had not been created to inspire and soothe our spirits. Many European serfs struggled in bondage, while many African and Asian empires flourished in independence. Native Americans peopled America's soil free of slavery's blight. And Hitler's Holocaust had yet to show the depths human evil can reach when good men and women remain silent or indifferent. 100 or 1,000 years from now, will civilization and humankind remain? Will America's dream be alive, be remembered, and be worth remembering? Will the United States be a blip or a beacon in history? Can our founding principle that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights withstand the test of time, the tempest of politics and greed, and become deed and not just creed for every man, woman, and child? Is America's dream big enough for every second child who is female, every fifth child who is Latina, every sixth child who is poor, every fifth child now who is poor, every sixth child who is black, and every seventh child who is mentally or physically challenged? And is our dream big enough to share with the over 2.5 billion people worldwide who live in poverty, including the more than 10 million mothers, babies, and young children who die each year before age 5, mainly from pregnancy, childbirth, and poverty-related causes around the world? and read Nicholas Kristof's marvelous book and look at that wonderful documentary, and let's see how we can stop all of these preventable maternal and child deaths. A churning new world order is being born that is affecting every citizen and human on Earth. Changing rules of doing global business are creating important new questions, challenges, and opportunities. Who will gain and who will be left behind? Will the chances of the poor, women, and children at home and around the world be enhanced or exploited? Will powerful corporate interests eviscerate or respect democratic nation-state decision-making processes? Will multinational conglomerates be accountable to or run roughshod over governments, communities, and citizens here at home and abroad in pursuit of quicker and bigger profits? Will the changing nature of work and the demands of the new economy strengthen or weaken already frayed family and community bonds and job security? Will cultural homogenation and corporate branding contribute to or detract from the rich diversity of our nations and world's peoples? How can we close the spiraling divides between the rich and the poor and create a concept of enough for everybody? And how can our warring ways be curbed and transformed in a world that is teetering on the brink of nuclear suicide so that our children can feel safe and hopeful again and trust adults to protect them and their futures? After 9/11, a little girl, 11 years old, up in a Connecticut suburb says, "It occurs to me that I might not grow up." Well, this occurs to our inner city young children of color almost every day in their lives as they struggle to reach adulthood in war zones in their neighborhoods. If I could be granted only one wish and pass only one universal law, I would dismantle the arsenals of nuclear and conventional weapons of death in the world, produce no more, and invest the trillions of saved resources in tools of life for the poor and hungry, homeless, sick, and uneducated children and people on God's earth. I loved what President Eisenhower said a long time ago. He said, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signified in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, from those who need clothing and shelter and do not get it." We need to rethink what is important. Something is seriously awry in our wonderful nation when the highest income taxpayers, 400 of them, had in 2008 the combined tax revenues of 22 state governments with 42 million people. They don't need another tax cut, as the current administration, the current Congress in the House is trying to give them. On top of the Bush tax cuts, which I hope will expire, they're trying to give them another $260,000+ on top of that. They don't need a tax cut. We need to invest in our children. We don't have a money problem. We have a values and priorities problems, and you need to make yourself heard. And obviously, we all are aware of the growing income and wealth gap and the extraordinary amount that the top 1% has that is about what the net worth of the bottom 90% is. This is not, I think, the way America can move forward together in the future, and we have got to all speak up for everybody paying their fair share. And I would not deny anybody their first, second, third billion, as long as they're not hungry children, as long as they're not uneducated children. We just simply must make sure that the survival needs of our children are taken care of. We must maintain our influence through our moral authority and through showing that democratic capitalism can work by preparing our children for the future and having a workforce that's going to be able to compete with any in the world. But we have got to begin to make our values of freedom and justice in a world that is desperate for moral leadership and example. You know, make it real, make it live, make it something that we can see other people can aspire to. And we're not going to be able to do that unless we repair our limping economy, Unless we create the early childhood development and public education systems that we must have if we're going to have a strong military in the future. 75% of our children, our young people 17 to 24, can't get into the military because they either can't, they're not educated enough, have health problems that didn't get dealt with. But this is a military issue of the quality of our public education system, and we know the quality of care that begins before birth and that is a continuum of care until we can get our children to adulthood is important, because children do not come in pieces. And I believe that good policy is like good parenting, and we want to give to all children what they need and reweave the fabric of family and community that has become so frayed. We have got to invest in our children and prepare them and our country to compete in the years ahead. So I'm so pleased again to see the focus that Duke is putting on human development and on the child and family and on looking at the underlying values that we as citizens and leaders should reflect. I quote Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great Protestant German theologian, in every speech I make. He believed, as I do, that the test of the morality of a society is how it treats its children. And we flunk in America Bonhoeffer's test every hour of every day. Let me just list, and there are too many statistics here, but I want to just share and have you think about what America's going to look like through the prism of these figures. But every second and a half, a public school child is suspended. Every 8 seconds of the school day, a high school student drops out. Every 17 seconds, as we sit here, a child is arrested. Every 19 seconds, a baby is born to an unmarried mother. Every 29 seconds, a child is born into poverty in the richest nation on earth. And children are our poorest group of Americans, and the younger they are, the poorer they are. We know an awful lot about early brain development and the importance of the first 3 years of life, and yet we're not catching up with what the research shows and what best practices show for our youngest among us. And we will pay for it, and we do pay for it in later school dropouts and in children who are hopeless and are not able to realize their full potential. Every 30 seconds during the school year, we have a child corporally punished. We have abolished corporal punishment in our prisons, at least in theory, but we still permit it in the schools across the country. Every 47 seconds, one of our children is abused or neglected. Every 67 seconds, and I want to just boast that this is now a better figure. It used to be 42 seconds last year, but now with the Affordable Care Act, which we must keep, every 67 seconds a child is born without health insurance, and we must get out there and enforce it. Getting the law is only the first step. Enrolling children actually is really the important effort that must go on, and I am very pleased that we have a relationship now with a number of school districts around the country to enroll children when they show up for school, asking them just by putting a question on the form, are you enrolled in CHIP or in Medicaid? And we're able now to have campus-based figures, data that we can track those children, and in Texas alone, we have been able to enroll over 800,000 children over the last several years, and we're spreading this around the country. So we really have to make the law become concrete by helping, and I'm looking forward to seeing more and more school districts seeing healthcare and nutrition as an integral part of their function as schools, because if children can't see the teacher or hear the teacher or doesn't have their attention deficit order diagnosed, they're not going to learn. And so we're seeing indications the school districts are getting the light bulbs to go off in their head that they need to deal with the whole child and that this is an education issue, and that's wonderful. And we're looking forward to trying to see how we can do more on co-location of services and redefining the school and its place in the community so there can be a one-stop stopping place for all that they need. I loved going to public schools in Copenhagen and seeing the dental chair there, just seeing what they got in the morning and in terms of food and in the evenings, and in some of the inner city schools, even the parents got to get these kinds of services. And so I think that we have a great opportunity as we need to replace a number of schools over the next decade to try to redefine what the school is and to place it firmly in communities and to engage all parts of the community. And I'd love to have senior services next to them so that they can have those grandmas and grandpas when there are absent parents in the home, and library services. So it can be fun to think about what is this 21st century school that we're going to have that will serve the whole needs of the whole child. Every 85 seconds, a child is born to a teen mother. And the two biggest predictors of who's going to become a teen parent are basic skills and poverty. And we come back to that over and over again. We could fill up the city of Atlanta each year with children having children. Every 2 minutes, a baby is born at low birth weight. Every 3 minutes, one of our children is arrested for a drug offense. Every hour and a half, a child dies from an accident, but the one that bothers me the most is every 3 hours. A child dies from a firearm. We lose over 3,000 children each year to gunfire, and 3 times as many with gun injuries. We lose more children to gunfire each year than we lost in all the American battle casualties in the Iraq War. We lose more black boys to gunfire every year than we lost in all the lynchings in American history. We lose more preschool children to gunfire every year than we lose police officers in the line of duty. What is it going to take for us to stand up and say we're going to stop the killing of children and to get guns out of the hands of those who threaten our children? We need to really make our children feel safe. Every 8 hours, a child or a teen commits suicide, and I read these all the time, and I get depressed about them, and I won't give you more of them. But I think that we need to think about what the implications of this are, about who we are and what the American future looks like. And we need to consider how we can begin to redefine what we measure as success in this United States. We are first in gross domestic product, and I'm fine, and I'm proud of that. We're first in the number of billionaires. I'm proud of that. But I'm not proud of the fact that we're first in the number of persons who are incarcerated, that we're first in military technology and defense expenditures and military weapons exports, but we're 13th in teen suicide rates, that we're 17th in reading scores, that we're 22nd in low birth weight rates, that we're 23rd in science scores, 30th in infant mortality rates, 31st in math scores, 31st in the gap between the rich and the poor, worst in the industrialized world in relative child poverty, worst in teen birth rates, worst in divorce rates, worst in lifetime use of cocaine, marijuana, and tobacco, worse in protecting our children against gun violence. We can do better, and we must do better. I often quote Robert Kennedy when he gave one of the speeches in the year in which he died about what the GNP quotes, what it counts, and whether that is the most important thing. He said that for too much and too long, we seem to have surrendered community excellence and community values to the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product, if we should judge America by that, counts air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of damage and carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for those who break them. It counts the destruction of our redwoods and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm and the cost of a nuclear warhead, and armored cars for police who fight riots in our streets. The GNP counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife, and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it tells us everything about America except why we are proud that we are Americans. We need to think about it. I remember looking at the 3 top goals of Harvard freshmen a little over a decade ago, and their top goals in life were fame, power, and money. I think that we need to redefine the measure of success and to make it service and justice between us and to make America a beacon in the world. So what can we do beyond defining or redefining the measure of our success? Second is I hope we can learn from our history and really try to move forward and not repeat the mistakes of the past. I am deeply worried about where we are in this country and the growing racial and education and economic divisions. And I don't want us to fight another, I don't want us to return to racial apartheid, and we are resegregating in many aspects of our life. I don't want us to go back through the riots and forget the toll of the bloody Civil War. And I'm deeply concerned about the reemergence of racial apartheid under the guise of incarceration, mass incarceration, including the use of private prisons. Michelle Alexander, if you haven't read her book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in an Era of Colorblindness, do so, talk about it, debate it. But I think that what we call the Children's Defense Fund, the Cradle of Prison Pipeline, is one of the most dangerous processes going on in America today, and is going to reestablish segregation and reinstitute racial apartheid and undo the last 50 years of racial and social progress. And we wouldn't have a cradle to prison pipeline if we could realize our mission statement, which is to ensure every child a healthy start and a head start, a fair start, a safe start and a moral start in life, and successful transition to adulthood with the help of caring adults and caring communities. But mass incarceration is really beginning to move us backwards, and we have got to move away from incarceration as a matter of first resort. Look at all the feeder systems into that pipeline, and the schools are a prime feeder system, and zero-tolerance school discipline policies that are putting children out for things that used to be handled in the principal's office. I've never understood why we suspend and expel children for not coming to school for truancy and tardiness. You should find out why they're not coming to school and do something about it. And I think that we need to work together on trying to see how we can rewrite discipline codes and try to make it focused on the child and keeping the child in school and out of schools. And my juvenile justice friends and the judges say that they are becoming the discipline arm of the school system. I don't know how it makes any sense to handcuff and expel a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old child for having a temper tantrum before a parent can get to school. 6-year-olds should not be arrested. 6-year-olds should not be handcuffed. I think we adults have lost our common sense, and we need to change, but there's no outcry in our communities about this. And as we have been looking and holding summits around the country on the Cradle of Prison Pipeline, the number one issue that comes up among our young people is the zero-tolerance school discipline policies. If you took the New York City police system, school security system, it would be the 6th largest in the country after Boston. We've got to stop criminalizing schools and criminalizing our children at younger and younger ages, and really make our priority keeping them in school and making sure that they get out of school and have safe spaces after school and in the summer. But this paradigm of punishment and of incarceration that has replaced what we've never done enough of, which is invest in prevention, early intervention, has to change. And it will help us all. Our states are spending on average 2.5 times per prisoner, and in North Carolina, 3.85 per prisoner than per public school pupil. I can't think of a dumber investment policy, and I think that we should save money and save child lives and move in a new direction in terms of how we're going to invest in our children for the future. So many poor babies in rich America enter the world with multiple strikes against them, being born without prenatal care, and we've now made a stride forward with the new Affordable Care Act at low birth weight, and to a teen, poor, and poorly educated single mother and absent father. At crucial points in their development after birth and until adulthood, more risks pile on making a successful transition to productive adulthood. Significantly less likely an involvement in the criminal justice system and dropping out of school, significantly more likely Since children of color have always been disproportionately poor, their odds of incarceration as adults greatly exceed that of white children. Black children are more than 3 times as likely as white children to be poor, and are more than 4 times as likely to be detained in a juvenile correction facility. A black boy born in 2001 has a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. A Latino boy, a 1 in 6 chance of going to prison. White boy, a 1 in 17 chance, but this is the wrong direction. We must break up this cradle to prison pipeline, and we must replace it with hope, with education, and with the supports that every child needs. We must not continue to let the present strangle the past, strangle the present and the future. And we are now in this 3rd generation of incarceration of black fathers, and increasingly women and girls are going into the criminal justice system. And this is not going to be good for America. It is not good for them. And we have got to focus on mass incarceration, and we have got to focus on the privatization of prisons. We should not have people incarcerated for profit. The Corrections Corporation of America sent out a letter to 48 state governors offering to run their prisons for them for 20 years if they could be assured occupancy rates of 90%. And the occupancy rates are usually poor children of color and poor immigrants of color. You've got to wake up and see it. We've got to break it up. We've got to begin to stop this return to racial and class apartheid. I think if we were called into account today, that America would not pass the test of the prophets, the Gospels, and all great faith. Christians who profess to believe, and I grew up in a Baptist family with fathers, grandfathers, and all the others, and people say, why do you do what you do? I say, I never had a chance not to do what I do because of what my parents did and my community co-parents did, and I just do what they do. When my mother died, someone asked me in my hometown what I did, and I had an insight that I do exactly what my parents did. I just do it on a different scale. I had 12 foster sisters and brothers. They took in, and I still am guilty from thinking about my unkind reaction when I woke up one morning and found an orphan in the room with me, and one of my 2 pairs of shoes given. Serving the community was as much a part of my upbringing as eating and sleeping and going to church. It never would occur to me. And my daddy used to always say that God runs a full employment economy, and that if you follow the need, you will never lack for any purpose. And I feel so lucky to have been born who I was when I was, with the parents and community elders that I had, with huge challenges, but which gave a sense of purpose. And then when I went off to college, there was Dr. King and Dr. Benjamin Mays and Howard Zen, and a chance to help change the things that were around me. And then I went off to Mississippi, and there were these incredibly great leaders like Miss Fannie Lou Hamer and others who inspired. And when I look back at the sacrifice that they made and what they did with so little to transform America, I know we together, with all of our additional resources, can transform America for our children, and that has got to be the next great social movement. I do not want to spend the next 5 years of my life with the Children's Defense Fund, that's going to be 40 next year, fighting for 20% budget cuts rather than 40% budget cuts. We've got to create new political space. We have got to demand that every child is ready for school, that every child gets prenatal care, that every child, 0 to 5, and I started having these conversations since it looks as if Duke is already ahead of the curve on this, and I'm looking forward to working with you on that. But we're trying to draft a new proactive agenda to put into the new Congress, and I'm sure that this will not be easy, but to be for something, and being for a high-quality, comprehensive early childhood system. And think about how many jobs that could create if we could do right for children, as well as expand high-quality public sector programs and private sector programs that would serve these children's needs. We want to make sure that every child is college and career ready, and that is talked about a lot. But how do we do that? And how do we make sure that there's high-quality, safe after-school and summer space? And think of how many jobs, if you phased in high-quality systems in all of these areas, this could create over the next few years. We have new Common Core standards, which I think is moving us toward greater competitiveness for our children, but are we going to be giving the children what they need in order to meet the requirements? If we don't have full-day, high-quality kindergarten in 40 of our 50 states, North Carolina is ahead of the curve, does have full-day kindergarten, but we had 12 states that had it last time. It's a couple of years ago, but they're in the middle of budget cuts. They're cutting back on them. So how do we have a universal, high-quality pre-K system and a kindergarten system that can make children school-ready and create new jobs and give young people who are coming out of college good ways of serving the future and serving children who are left behind? And how do we end child poverty? We need to change the terms of the debate. We talk about we can't afford to end child poverty. We can't afford not to end child poverty. Professor Bob Solow, Dr. Solow, the Nobel laureate and economist, shared a study for the Children's Defense Fund on the cost of child poverty a number of years back, and he found that every year back then that we kept 14 million children in poverty. It was costing the country about $500 billion in foregone productivity and independency. We now have 16.1 million poor children, and it's very costly in terms of school dropouts and in terms of dependency and hopelessness. And so I hope that we can get a robust debate about ending poverty, by providing jobs, by having better paying jobs, by making work pay through continuing and increasing the refundability of under the tax credits, by having the child care and other working supports that people need. But we should make that a goal that can serve us and help us come closer to our national ideal of who we say we want to be. Third thing I think we can do is to realize that all of us must become movement builders and get out of our current comfort zones and to realize that it's our responsibility to make America, America. Many people are sitting around waiting for Dr. King to come back or wait for the next charismatic leader. Dr. King's not coming back. We're it. We might as well get our act together and figure out how in this much more complicated time we're going to figure out the new theater of movement and how we find our voice in this new era. The central fact of Dr. King's life, my role model, Ella Baker, said a long time ago, was that he realized from Montgomery, Alabama to his death in Memphis that the movement made him rather than him making the movement. Diane Nash, who was an extraordinary young woman who headed up the Nashville movement and was responsible for a lot of the Selma March, said that if people think it was Martin Luther King's movement, then today they, young people, are more likely to say, gosh, I wish we had a Martin Luther King here today to lead us. But if people knew that the movement started and the question they need to ask themselves is, what can I do? Then we have a very different way of organizing people. And I think that what can I do is the question that every man, woman, and child in America must ask ourselves today, and children need to be taught. And boy, do they know this if you engage them in being citizens, that they're not citizens in waiting. And every one of our children who participate in a model program for freedom schools in the summer engage in at least one civic activity, and there is nothing like seeing a senator's face if 200 or 300 children show up in his office asking why he's about to vote against their health care. And I think that they feel empowered, and I think they need to understand that their voices can be read, can be effective, and we often forget that it was children who were the frontline soldiers of the civil rights movement. And they all read about little Ruby Bridges, and she came this summer at our national conference and told what it was like to be a 6-year-old going to school and staying there every day by herself and walking through the mobs and even praying for the mobs. And so they all learned what this 6-year-old did. They all learned about what the Birmingham Children's March did. Dr. King wrote his famous letter from a Birmingham jail, but it didn't have much resonance. And when he came out of jail with very little publicity and had a mass meeting in Birmingham that night, he called for everybody to fill up the jails, and not one adult stood up, but the children stood up. And the children went and broke Bull Connor's back, and through those children's marches came the movement that eventually ended up in making a huge difference in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary next year, but I hope we can remember it was children. And I was always deeply moved, but now and again had my wake-up call, because my last school desegregation case in Mississippi was in Sunflower County, Mississippi. And I got a call from Miss May Bertha Carter. She and her husband, Matthew, were sharecroppers. They had 11 children, but they didn't want their last 8 children to get to be sharecroppers. And so they asked if I would sue to break up freedom of choice, the sham freedom of choice in Drew, Mississippi. And I said, yes, ma'am, we won. And those 8 children sat as the only black children in the Drew County schools, Drew City schools, for their entire time. But they stuck. They got shot at. They got evicted from their plantation. They got harassed daily. But they all graduated from those schools. They all went on to Ole Miss and Mississippi State and graduated. They all became professionals. But then a few years ago, I got a call, which is why we're doing the Cradle to Prison Pipeline, that Ms. May Bertha's grandson was in Parchment Prison. And I said, Ms. May Bertha's Carter's grandson could not possibly be in Parchment Prison. But it turns out it was only one generation of regression, no jobs, bad schools still, and we can't have that kind of sacrifice. Dr. King called, and all of us have to be thermostat leaders, because if we're going to change the political climates, we have to speak up. There are no friends in politics, and we're going to have to organize, organize, and organize, and there are a number of wonderful people doing wonderful things. You're having a robust school reform movement these days, but it's going to take lots of parents and lots of voices like you standing up and demanding that we have a new commitment to educating every child. Finally, I just want to share, because I go through periods. All of my family are clippers, and my sister sent me an old clip about Noah's Ark. So I just want to end with Noah's Ark and a few lessons that could serve us well today, and with a prayer, too. And this little anonymous person in this clipping said, everything that our nation and all of us need to know about life can be learned from Noah's Ark. And the first lesson was, don't miss the boat. And I really hope that if you take away nothing else from tonight, is that America's going to miss the boat if we continue to let a majority of all of our children in all racial and income groups not be able to read at 4th and 8th grade, and dropping out of school if they're poor and minority children at extraordinary levels. And over 75% of our black and Latino children, who are going to be a majority of our child population very shortly, cannot read or compute at grade level in 4th or 8th grade. That's a disaster. And if you can't read or compute in this globalizing world, you're being sentenced to social and economic death to that prison pipeline. America is not going to succeed in that way. We've got to reverse course. The second is to remember that we're all in the same boat. And many people don't think they have any self-interest in helping these poor Latino and black children who are going to be already our majority of our babies. We need to get over it, because I'd rather have them working for us rather than our working to keep them in prison. So we should really begin to get a better perspective. We are all in the same boat, and America has to be big enough, its dream, to make us all welcome and have enough. The third lesson from this anonymous sage was to plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, he reminded us. And tomorrow really is today. And children have only one childhood, and providing all of our children right now the healthy start and the early childhood experiences, which I know so many of you in this room are committed to, the first-rate schools, the aftercare, the first-rate teachers, and the stimulating high-quality out-of-school programs must be the first order of national business, and we have got to all insist on it. The fourth lesson is, don't listen to critics and naysayers. If you don't want to be anything, and don't say anything, and don't do anything, and so you really have got to speak out and not let others deter you from doing what is right. And the last, which is my favorite, was to remember that the Ark was built by amateurs, the Titanic by professionals. And that gets back to the importance of citizen activism. Democracy really isn't a spectator sport. We're all going to have to come together around a common commitment to children and push the political process, regardless of who's in office. But we need to make sure that the people who are committed to children get into the office. We need to solve our deficit problems, but our human deficit problems must take priority. If the foundation of your house and the foundation of your future is crumbling, you don't say we can't afford to fix it. We've got to do it, and our children have to get what they need. Let me end with two prayers, because I worry a lot about our privileged children, just as I do about our unprivileged children. And so I want to just share a 21st century prayer for children, and I'm so pleased with the Duke Engage and all of the clinical programs and volunteer programs that this university is putting forward, and I'm just very grateful that we've been the recipients of that through a number of our Freedom School programs in North Carolina and South Carolina. And this commitment to service around the world as well as here, I hope will continue and grow, as I'm sure it will. But I hope that we can all ask God to help us not to raise a new generation of children with high intellectual quotients but low caring and compassion quotients, with sharp competitive edges but dull cooperative instincts, with highly developed computer skills but poorly developed consciences, with a gigantic commitment to the big I but little sense of responsibility to the bigger we, with mounds of disconnected information without a moral context to determine its worth, with more and more knowledge and less imagination and appreciation for the magic of life that cannot be quantified or computerized, with more and more worldliness and less wonder and awe for the sacred and everyday miracles of life. God, help us to create and raise children who care. And the role of Duke in building leaders, but with compassion and a commitment to service and to lifting as they go, is so important, and I, again, am very grateful for that. And the last is for us all to renew our commitment to those children who have been left behind. And my favorite prayer for children is by a friend named Hughes, who lives down in Tennessee. And when I'm waning in my energy, I pick it up and remember this poem, and she lets me have the license to change a few of her words. But she says, we pray, and I say accept responsibility and will stand for children who sneak popsicles before supper, erase holes in math notebooks, and who can never find their shoes. But we also commit to praying and standing up and building a movement for children who stare at photographers from behind barbed wires and jail bars, who can't bound down the streets in a new pair of sneakers, who never counted potatoes, who were born in places we wouldn't be caught dead and never go to the circus, and who live in an X-rated world. Let's pray and accept responsibility for children who bring us sticky kisses and handfuls of dandelions, who hug us in a hurry and forget their lunch money. But let's also pray and stand up for and fight for those children who never get dessert, who have no safe blankets to drag behind them, who watch their parents watch them die, who can't find any bread to steal, who don't have any rooms to clean up, whose pictures aren't on anybody's dresser, and whose monsters are real. Let's pray and work harder and build a movement for children who spend all of their allowance before Tuesday, who throw tantrums in the grocery store, pick at their food, and like ghost stories, who shove dirty clothes under the bed and never rinse out the tub, who often get visits from the tooth fairy, who don't like to be kissed in front of the carpool, and who squirm in church and temple and mosque and scream in the phone, and whose tears we sometimes laugh at and whose smiles can make us cry. But let's also use all the gifts and talents and energy that we have to build the needed transforming movement for children whose nightmares come in the daytime, who absolutely will eat anything, who've never seen a dentist, who aren't spoiled by anybody, who go to bed hungry and cry themselves to sleep, who live and move, who have no being. Let's each recommit tonight to praying and accepting responsibility and standing up and raising our voices and voting for and building a movement for all of those children who are our own, who want to be carried, but we've got to do it for those children who must be carried. Let's do it for the children we never give up on, but also for those children who don't get a second chance. Let's do it for those children whom we smother, but also for the children who will grab the hand of anyone kind enough to offer it. I hope each of us will offer that hand. What good does it do to be the richest nation on earth, and we lose our children, we lose our soul, we lose our future? So thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you. Did I talk over my,
We have 2 mics, one up there and one down
okay.
here. And if you want to come down, we have a little time for questions. If you've got a mic. We have a few minutes to overcome shyness.
Hi there, my name's Danny. Thank you so much for coming. I'm a former Freedom School intern, so...
Yay. Where were you?
Yeah.
Where were you in Freedom School?
Mount Jezreel Baptist Church in Silver Spring.
Terrific.
So my question is, one of the recent events that has made me more cynical was the teacher strike in Chicago. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were about the events that happened and how that sort of fits into all of our responsibilities as adults to really, I guess, to think about children first.
Well, we've got to think about children first. Any school system that is failing a majority of all children of all racial and income groups, and who is failing 80% of black children and 75% of Latino children has to be changed. You cannot have children not reading and computing at grade level, and so the school systems and public schools have to serve all children well. I'm not against unions, but I am against unions who don't articulate or make sure that they keep children first. There's got to be accountability. And I'm pleased that, at least in Chicago, that the school day has been extended, that they are moving towards some teacher accountability provisions. And we need to keep at it, and we need to be doing it all around the country. It's children have got to be educated. And every adult in classrooms have got to see that as their first, second, and third responsibility. I thank you for what you're doing in Freedom Schools. One of the things that I did not know was how much of a teacher pipeline many of the interns, what it's providing in terms of black males and Latino males going into the classrooms. I think we have a real opportunity over the next years to begin to diversify the teaching force more now. Secretary Duncan came to a couple of Freedom Schools and asked if we could pull out any of the former interns who had changed their minds and gone into teaching, and about 30 showed up, and I was really quite amazed, and many of them are understanding that this is the place where they've got to go and try to reclaim our children and to carry on the movement from the last times. And so many of them are going in, of our young people who have been and are in Freedom Schools are going into teaching. And so I tell everybody stay out of law school, and I tell everybody to go into the classroom, because that's where the battleground is. And they need role models that look like them and who came from some of the same experiences. But I think that we're going to have many more battles. I hope we can have better organizations and be better prepared, we know, but I think that we need to be very clear that we're not going to back down when it comes to making sure that children learn how to read and write and be prepared for the future. That is the job of education. And so I hope that we'll have more noise, but I hope we'll have more light, and I hope that more parents will get engaged. I hope that more citizens will get engaged, and I hope we're opening up a number of very frank conversations with our friends in the teacher unions, because zero tolerance is another one. You cannot have them putting children out of school right and left and contributing to a massive dropout rate and into the prison pipeline. They're going to have to figure it out. So I think this is a time now for promising and thoughtful but insistent debate about what our children are going to give, because we cannot let them go on further with this growing achievement gap based on both race and income. And we've got to educate them, and they must come first. So everybody get involved in public education. I am for public charter schools as a competitive force, but I believe that 90% of the children are going to stay in public schools, and so we've got to change the whole public school system. And there are multiple models around. All of us know about KIP, and there are multiple models of things that are working, but the issue is how do you scale it all up and make it available to all children, so that I think we've got a real opportunity. There are going to be 1 million or more teacher openings over the next years. Go teach for a while. And let's begin to change the culture of the schools. And I go very flatly everywhere and say we want everybody to teach, but if you don't love, you can have the best credentials, but if you don't love children and respect children and expect all children to learn, get out of the classroom. And we must really hold them accountable. Because these children, as you've heard from some of these horrible statistics, are living such tough lives. They don't need to come to school and have another negative influence in their lives. And so what potential we have now to sort of save the next generations, and I just hope that more of us will step up to the plate and do it. So it was not nice in Detroit, in Chicago, but it was necessary, and hopefully we'll begin to get some things that are moving in the right direction for children, but children's got to come first. I'll be shorter.
Thank you, Dr. Edelman, for coming here. It's a real honor to listen to you speak. I want to challenge you, though, because you've told us that you support public schools and that you're, of course, against segregation, and that you support teachers. But we've also heard that you support public charters, and we all know that your son is a major businessman when it comes to charter schools. And we also should all be aware that charter schools are... Okay, how can you say that you support teachers when you basically just blamed the Chicago teachers' unions for the problems of...
No, I didn't blame the Chicago teachers. I said I am for teacher accountability. I am for an extended school day. And I am for reasonable... Listen, I'm not blaming the teachers. And teachers ought to stop being defensive there. Clearly, the bottom line is how many of Chicago's children are achieving in school and are being prepared for schools. And and we're going to have a discussion. And public charters are public charters. They're public schools as well. And a little competition never hurt anybody. Exactly. And this is not about blaming teachers. It's about bringing everybody to the table to say, what do children need? And how do we make sure that every child gets what they need? And we know the importance of teachers. And so if we could move the blame out of the way and sit down and look at the realities of what children are not getting, then maybe we can move forward.
So you guys just cut off my microphone.
I'm sorry, don't do that. I'm a big girl.
I mean, you told me to not be, let's not be defensive after my microphone got cut off. My question is that, how do you account for the inconsistencies in your argument? Because yes, we have to support public schools, and the public schools are where our children are, but in the case of Chicago, you got mayoral control. The problems in Chicago lasted decades, including Secretary Duncan. He was in charge of the schools then, and they weren't doing well then either, so you got Mayor Emanuel, who takes control of the schools and tells the teachers that they have to be... So how do you account for the fact that you're saying we have to support teachers, but you're also saying that if the students don't succeed, we have to blame the teachers and fire the teachers and replace them with the ones who can?
We have to support children and hold the adults in children's lives, teachers, parents, politicians accountable for making sure that children get what they need. And secondly, I am for a good public
And I'm a public school teacher, so,
Let me finish.
I'm sorry that the whole room is gone against me, but
No.
Yeah, I think it's a question that deserves an answer. I mean, how do you rectify the...
Let me finish answering.
Because charter schools are major segregators, and they segregate our county.
And some of them aren't. And I am for good charters and good schools, even if they're segregated. The issue is whether children are learning. And I'm against private charters and private vouchers, but I am for good education for all children wherever they are. And teachers must be a part of that solution. And I'll be glad to debate offline. So why don't you wait for me outside?
Other people want to, yes.
I know you do. I hope you do.
Question upstairs there.
Dr. Edelman, thank you so much for attending. My name is Kamisha Jones, and I'm a graduate of North Carolina Central University. And
I had two brothers who graduated from North Carolina State.
Yes,
Central,
yes.
That's great.
And UNC Law. So I really commend your efforts, and I thank you for being here. And my question goes along with probably what your response might have been to that gentleman who asked the question. I would love to get your thoughts about what are some of the reforms that you believe would be effective in traditional schools, and how can public charter schools and traditional schools work together to bring about a new reform for education so all children can learn?
Well, I think that teacher quality, obviously, and teacher accountability is very important. I think parent engagement is very important. I think that having strong curriculum, but more importantly, high expectations for every child. I think trying to recognize that poverty and what goes on in the neighborhood affects education, and trying to, again, address the needs of the whole child is terribly important. And I think that, again, I keep emphasizing public charters. I think that I see charters, public charters, as a 10% solution. But I think that the key is kind of being child-centric and having that come first, and having a strong curriculum and high expectations. And one of the things I'm learning is just plain old energy from the young people. And I think trying to have longer school hours and longer school years, which many of the public charters are doing, and which we're now getting a more thoughtful debate about in this country, because children need to be safe after school and stimulated after school and stimulated in the summer, because a huge amount of the achievement loss comes in those summer months. And that's why you need freedom schools everywhere, and everybody having high quality programming everywhere in the summer, because they can't go to the art museums and the museums that all the things that we who are privileged can afford to do. But I think that there are no magic things. I just think the children respond to our expectations. They'll respond if we live up. They'll live up to them or down to them. And what we need is just caring, well-prepared adults who are just determined that children are going to learn. Now, we had bad segregated schools and hand-me-down books when I was growing up. But boy, did those black teachers make sure that we were going to get to know our tables, that we were not going to fail, that we had to do it 15 times. They didn't give up. And so it's that determination that we're going to do whatever it is that we need to have children learn. And I think it's really also important to have as many teachers as we can come from the communities. People need to go out and visit parents. I mean, I just believe strongly in knocking on doors, and in an awful lot of places, including my small hometown, a lot of the teachers don't even come from there. And I loved it in the old days because my public school teachers were my Girl Scout troop leader, was my Sunday school teacher. We were part of the whole fabric of the community and of life. And somehow, I know you can't go back and recreate the past, but we're going to have to find ways of reweaving the fabric of community and finding ways in which people can come together. And I think, obviously, the point of coming together has to be around our children. So I don't think there are any magic bullets. I just think that there are just some common sense commitments that adults make to children. And it's to make sure that they get a high-quality education, they get a caring set of adults. And I have watched how one caring teacher or one caring grandmother or one caring school counselor, and there are many of them all over the place, can make an enormous difference. One of my two favorite programs at the Children's Defense Fund, because I can't stand that anybody would give up on any child, is what we call Beat the Odds. And we watch children, and have over the last 22 years in a bunch of cities, celebrated children who've gone through abuse and neglect and violence and homelessness and everything imaginable. And somehow one teacher or one counselor saw them and gave them a sense of hope and a spark. And they're the pick of our leadership pool. We now have 700 of them, and we're now trying to bring them all back for next year. But my favorite this year is a kid who is in her second year at a place that she said was her dream school, MIT, who was homeless and had a mentally ill mother, gorgeous, 4'11". And when she came in saying she wanted to go to MIT, everybody said in the selection committee, oh, ha, ha, ha. Well, she got into MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, Dartmouth, and she chose MIT, and she's a star. But she came back this summer and she worked in a homeless shelter, our first Freedom School in a homeless shelter at DC General Hospital. And she was able to commit to relate to those children in ways in which somebody ordinary would not have been able to. So we don't have a right to give up on children, but again, it's about loving them and respecting them and having high expectations from them and sticking with them and kind of just being their advocate. But it's about focusing on children. And when that happens, most of them will try to live up to those good expectations. So go teach and be rigorous. We had tough disciplinarians, but they didn't put us out of school. We had tough, demanding people, and we tried to live up to those expectations, and some of us did okay.
You have time for about two or three more questions. Next.
Good evening, Dr. Edelman. I just want to say that you are my shero.
Thank you.
I missed work this afternoon just to be here with you. I'm a low-income grandparent, who has, and great-grandparent, who has been in education.
I can't see you. I want to see you.
I'm here.
You're right here. Okay, I'm looking up. Okay, thank you.
Who has been an education advocate for the past 30 years. I started with after-school programs because I realized that many of the children in our community did have ADHD, and we started with programs working with children through the summer in my community, and then moved up to policy advocacy. Particularly because of the testing program, and so many children in my community were failing the end-of-grade test. I'm from Wilson County, about 45 miles from here. I presently live in Raleigh. And one of the devastating things that happened in my community, we were one of the first to start with the standardized promotions. And we had 12,000 students in our school system, and we, as I said, we started early. From 97 to 2001, we had 9,080 retentions. Some of those retentions were 3 and 4 times, and right now, then Wilson County, my county, became first. That's when I created the homeschool prison cycle, because what I began to see was that our children were on a vicious cycle. You know, they come from the home, maybe dysfunctions, maybe not, but then went into schools and straight to the prison, and we're still having problems. I'm here today because some months ago I contacted your office because I saw where you were doing the crusade. I think it was called the Crusade of Churches. What was it called?
The Black Community Crusade.
Black Community Crusade for Churches, and wanted to, because I'm from Raleigh and Wilson County. Wanted to think the church is very complacent around the school to prison pipeline, around the incarceration of our children. So I set out on a mission to really be informed and raise the awareness. My question is November 13th, actually we're doing a press conference around the school to prison pipeline, and we've involved about 12 churches so far to inform the community about the cradle to prison school pipeline. The other is to challenge churches to get involved, but more importantly, my message is to parents, because I believe that we lay the foundation for the school to prison pipeline. And so my question to you today is as a grassroots parents, we know that we don't get very much attention unless there is an icon that's out front. So my question today is, how can you help me? My ministry is called the Mary Magdalene Ministries, and we're centered around the school to prison pipeline.
I'd love to talk to you. We have a Black Community Crusade for Children, and I am with you on the church. The gangs are available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and so are the drug dealers. And the church doors are closed too often. And coming out of the church, which was the center of the community, I am real tough. They got to open up these doors. Every one of them should do freedom schools. Everyone should be really reaching out to kids, working the streets, and there are wonderful examples of churches doing, so I just applaud you in pushing them. And we've got a number of church-based models, including freedom schools, that I'd love to talk to you about and share with you. I'd love to sort of send someone or get them on the phone to talk to you about what you can be doing to engage parents more. In freedom schools, parents have to come to a workshop every week. And again, if you make it positive, enable them to be better parents, they will do it. And secondly, you said you were a grandparent, a great-grandparent. I want to just do a shout-out to grandparents because we've got 4 million grandparents struggling to raise children, grandchildren, alone and with very few systems of support. And that's an issue that we work on a lot. And so we need to work with the grandparents as well. But I'd love to talk to you about the parent supports and the kind of models that you can be carrying with your, taking back to your congregations. The juvenile court judges, I used to say to them, they used to say, if we had somebody in the community to refer children to, we would not put them in jail. And it is usually a pattern that if one child in the family is in trouble, it means that probably other children in the family are in trouble. And for a while, we had a 1 church, 10 families program. It is real hard to keep the churches engaged on a sustained basis. And so we've been struggling with it, but we now have a very strong religious network of churches who are doing good things. I just said if each church would just take the children in the block right around them and really got to know them and really made them welcome. And I want to redefine what they get in Sunday school because they don't need to be reading about something that went on thousands of years ago. I want to get a hold of those Sunday school materials and rewrite them so that we can begin to revitalize and make the church an enticing place for children to come. But it is the key institution in our community. Too many have gotten caught up in prosperity gospel. Some of them have forgotten who they say they serve, and too many of them have closed their doors to the children in need, and we've got to change that. Yes. So I'd love to sort of work with you and give you some people who can help you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We have time for 2 more short questions.
And answers.
I'll make it very short. Hi, Dr. Edelman. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Janine Sato. I'm with the Center for Child and Family Policy.
Thank you.
And I was this morning at our local Partnership for Children's annual meeting. I recognize some faces of other folks who were here this morning. And there was some very positive news shared, but there was also some very distressing information shared, and that is that it's becoming increasingly obvious that our state is on the verge of dismantling our early childhood system. Can you give us any advice about how to battle this disastrous next step?
We have got to fight with all our might and learn how to show up and make our voices heard. We've got to find some new theater, but there's no substitute from just a whole lot of folk going down to visit their congressman and saying that you're going to hold them accountable. We do an annual voting record. And we just need to begin to sort of let people understand when you get a 30 or a 40 or you're going to be voting against early childhood that you're going to hear from the community and we're going to try to see how we can get you another job next time. You've got to organize politically and you've got to provide a consistent, sustained voice. Politicians respond to people that they hear from. And so children's advocates are going to simply have to organize and be tough. You should have Wednesdays. You should just be going to the lobby, do your homework, and go to the editorial boards and write the letters to the editor, do all the scut work. But then we're going to have to, I think, find new kinds of theater. And let me just say, it scares some folk, but I think I'm proud of the last 40 years and the new laws that are on the books, and some of them you've heard me talk about the problems a lot tonight. But there are a lot of good things that have happened. There are 26, 27 major new laws, but no good deed goes unpunished. The first law we got passed was Education for All Handicapped Children's Act, after we knocked on 13,000 doors and found children out of school all over America. And the one place we sought a national remedy was on special needs children, because we found that 750,000 children, which is why we did a door-to-door survey in 30 census tracts, were out of school, and that 2 million children are out of school, but there were 750,000 children between 7 and 13 who were out of school, and I couldn't figure out why they would be out of school and who they were, and the census data didn't tell us, which is why it's really important to knock on doors and get to know parents and get to know children, because you'll find a lot of facts behind the statistics. But the bottom line is that there were special needs children who were able to form coalitions of people who had children who had mental, emotional, and physical special needs who didn't really want to talk about it. They were really ashamed and in the closet. But the bottom line, we got Educational Handicapped Children's Act because a whole lot of folk built together a self-interest coalition and then lobbied for it, and then we spent a lot of time on enforcement. But now it's being misused in many ways because it's misclassifying children and resegregating, particularly black boys, as mentally retarded. And we've got to watch out for these mislabelings and the use of Ritalin because it's really rife now that we are redrugging children. Did you see there was a New York Times piece about 2 weeks ago where we had this pediatrician, which is what I know from the increasing numbers of calls that come into our office, who said that because of all the budget cuts that were coming, that he thought that the best thing he could do was to in a sense, stretch the label and label them so that they could get drugs. Because he says, we can't fix the system, we must try to fix the children. And this is not good. And so we've got to organize. Let me just say one last quick thing. There are many laws on the books, and many millions of children have been helped, and so I want to affirm progress, because handicapped children or not special needs children not going to school. Millions of children have gotten Head Start, child care, gotten protections from the child welfare system, and so as we celebrate our 40th anniversary, we'll lay out all of these things because you've done a lot. But we've gone about as far as we can go. We'll continue the traditional lobbying, the policy oversight, the monitoring of agency policies, the creating, but nothing is going to substitute in this next era for organizing. Thurgood Marshall and Charlie Houston did a brilliant thing in overturning 200 years of segregation law, and it resulted in Brown versus Board of Education. They didn't anticipate Southern resistance and the Cooper versus Aaron the next year of all deliberate speed. But and the law is indispensable as one crucial tool in trying to work from inside. So which is why you should get your letters to the editor and go visit and keep at them and embarrass them and make them ask why they're cutting 4-year-olds out from getting what we know works. But what we needed and are missing now in the children's movement is Miss Rosa Parks, and Dr. King, and we're missing the Freedom Rides, and we're missing the sit-in movement. We have not had a nonviolent direct action movement that will translate the legal things that we've got going for children into that next phase. And so we're going to have to figure out, and it's not the 60s, you can't reinvent the past, but we've got to figure out new theaters and new ways of finding voice. But that nonviolent direct action piece that can engage young people and women and people of faith, we've got to find a way to be able to do that so that children can get more visibility. So we're struggling with that, but I hope that we can talk to you, because we certainly don't want to see North Carolina dismantle its system. You've had a strong history, but you're on a lot of things, but they cannot go and continue to cut children. We have a new media campaign. It's called Be Careful What You Cut, because you're going to pay more for it later on, and we'd love to sort of share that with you, and I'd love to talk to you and connect you with other people in North Carolina that you may not be aware of that can help build a stronger voice to make sure that you not move backwards and also hopefully will move forward. So hang out there for me.
Okay, this is the last short question.
Last question? Sure. It's an 8-part question. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a current social work student and a former middle school teacher here in Durham, and I'm just curious, in light of the current budget cuts in education to our state, and then in addition to the movement building that we all need to be doing, if you have some examples of specific interventions inside the school that teachers, social workers, administration can be doing, and then particularly for social work, interventions at home with kids outside the school.
Well, I love the fact that there are a number of AmeriCorps young people who are working in the schools and trying to relate to the children. And in their nice little uniforms, and they're young, and they're there, and they're doing things that teachers can't always have time to do. And so I'd love to see many more volunteers, many more young folk like the AmeriCorps volunteers in our schools that are supplementing teachers. I'd love to figure out how we can train more of our high school young people to be junior servant leaders, or at least to begin to work with their younger peers in schools. They're young people who've never had a job. And it would be very nice, and we found, at least in our Freedom School networks, that when we have taken our 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds and placed them to work with teachers and with college students, that they rise to the occasion. And if we give them a $50 stipend during the summer and in the winter, that they feel like they're millionaires, and they can help their grandma cut the lights back on. And so we need to I didn't think when I was growing up that the church could run without me, without the children. And we were intricately involved with the adults in our lives in doing everything. And I looked back at the weekly pay when our church built down, and we were rebuilding it with bricks. There was 25 cents for all the young children who were carrying bricks, and all of us had leadership roles within our churches. So we need to find some service citizenship provisions where young people can be engaged in helping other young people. But we've also got to talk about how we do talk about wraparound services and make the school embedded in the community and engage grandparents and others. One of the toughest schools we ever had, but which was turned around when we had grandparents in the house on a regular basis and who just simply wouldn't give up with them. So I think that we need to just need more helping hands. We need to figure out how we get more grandparents there, but I think that there are roles to create new jobs that involve children or teenagers in some regular training, and where we found in my little hometown, we did it on a very small basis, that the young people, we did it with only black boys for the two winters that we have used it, that they really do step up to the plate if you combine their work and their stipend with learning and connecting them to the community college as potential CDA people to become early childhood folk. But children need to feel useful. And so I would hope that we can figure out a way to use many more volunteers in schools, but to also begin to get more social workers and health workers and counselors and others. And that is a debate we're having with a number of the teacher unions now, who are now understanding that they need help and that they can't do it all themselves. And if you get more volunteers in the schools, you'll build more of a political constituency to do better in those schools. And so, but there are some models, but I particularly just like the young people who are in City Year and others that are funded by AmeriCorps. I'd like to see that expanded. And they like to relate to older adults or older young people and get a sense of what they can become. And one of the things I'm trying so hard to do is to get a freedom school on every historically black college campus so that children can see college and not just prison in their future. And they need these black colleges to have a pool and a pipeline to get there, because many of them are a few hundred students away from closing. But we need to begin to connect the community with our children so that they can have a new vision of what they can become, because you can't really envisage that you can be anything different than go off to prison like everybody you see. Then you're going to have a perpetuating process, and we want to change that and break that cycle. So I thank you for all your questions and all you're doing, and I'm sorry I've been rambling a little bit, but anyway, thank you for coming out. I love being here.